was driving back to my place after spending the holidays with my parents, which is about an 8-hour drive if you don't hit traffic. I usually try to power through the whole trip in one go, but I left way later than I planned. So by the time I hit the halfway mark, it was already past 2 a.m. and I was practically falling asleep at the wheel. I decided to pull into one of those rest stops off the interstate just to catch a couple of hours of sleep before finishing the drive. It wasn't one of those big stops with a gas station and a food court, just a basic parking lot with a bathroom building and some vending machines. I parked under a light post because that felt safer, reclined the driver's seat a bit, but then realized it was too uncomfortable, so I climbed into the back seat to lay down. I had a blanket in the trunk I threw over myself. I must have been out for maybe an hour because when I woke up, I heard a sound right next to my head. It took me a second to process where I was, but then I heard it again. It was the sound of the back door handle being pulled up and letting go. But the terrifying part was that at the exact same time, I heard the front passenger handle click too. It wasn't just one person checking the car. There were two of them, checking different doors at the exact same second. I froze completely. I lay there under the blanket, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I thought they'd hear it. I remember thinking, why don't they just smash the window? If you want to steal a car or rob someone, breaking the glass is the easiest way to get in. But then I realized how quiet it was out there. Breaking a window makes a ton of noise, and even at 3 a.m., that draws attention. They were testing the doors because they wanted to be quiet. They moved around the car, trying the other side. I knew I couldn't just stay in the back seat. If they managed to pop a lock or decided to just break the glass anyway, I'd be trapped. As soon as I saw their shadows move toward the trunk area, I threw the blanket off and scrambled over the center console. I was clumsy about it. My foot got caught on the armrest, but I shoved myself into the driver's seat and jammed the keys into the ignition. The engine roared to life, and the headlights flicked on, lighting up the guy standing right in front of my hood. He was wearing a gray hoodie, and instead of running away, he lunged forward, slamming his hands down on the hood like he was trying to stop the car or scare me into stopping. I panicked and stomped on the gas, but I also jerked the wheel hard to the left to get around him. The car swerved, and I felt a heavy thud on the front corner. The guy lost his footing and hit the pavement hard. I didn't see him get up. I didn't stop to check on him either. I sped out of the parking lot and merged onto the highway, driving way too fast. I didn't slow down for at least 40 miles, until I saw a well-lit truck stop with a bunch of people around. I pulled in and parked under the bright canopy lights, my hands shaking so bad I couldn't even unbuckle my seatbelt for a minute. When I finally got out, I walked around to the front of the car to look. The plastic on the front bumper was cracked, but what made my stomach turn was the smear of dark red blood right near the headlight. I hit him with a lot of force. I mean, considering how fast I took off, that guy definitely didn't just walk away with a bruise. I washed it off with a squeegee and got out of there. I haven't told anyone about it since. My name is Louis, and this happened last year, when I was still doing late-night rides to try and pay off my car. I had a full-time day job at a warehouse, and I did rideshare on top of that. So by the time it got to around midnight on weekends, I was usually running on fumes and caffeine. That night had been slow. I kept telling myself one more decent trip, even though my eyes were already heavy, and I knew I should have gone home an hour earlier. I got an airport request heading toward my side of the city, so I accepted without even thinking about anything, except that it was finally a decent fare and in the right direction. The guy who got in looked like any other late flight passenger with a backpack and a worn-out face. We checked each other's names, and then it was just highway for a while. My eyes burning and the meter slowly climbing. His drop-off on the app was near an old strip of small businesses I'd seen before from the main road, the kind of place that's busy during the day and completely dead at night. I remember feeling a little relieved that it wasn't some random house far out in a dark neighborhood. Just one stop near a familiar sign and then I could go home. As we got off the highway and closer to it, the map wanted me to turn down a side street by houses, And I was already planning to stop there, under some porch lights, and call it a night. But right before the turn, he leaned forward a little and said he usually got dropped around the back because his friend worked there and could let him in through some rear door. Said it like it was normal, like he'd done it plenty of times. I said I was supposed to stick to the pin, but while I was saying that, I missed the side street, and now the app was already rerouting us the long way around the building. It was one of those tiny mistakes that doesn't feel like anything in the moment, but locks you into a different path. And instead of turning around, I let myself roll with it, because I didn't want to argue or look paranoid over something that still looked harmless on the screen. The front had lit signs and a main road. The back was a wide stretch of cracked pavement, loading docks, and a couple of tall lights that only lit circles on the ground instead of the whole lot. It had that empty, cut-off feeling right away. He told me I could pull a little farther down near a dumpster, said his friend usually came out around there, but I stopped in the open lane instead, so I wasn't right up against anything. We were technically at his stop already, but he didn't move to open the door. He stayed sitting there and started looking at his phone. Said he was letting his friend know exactly where we were and asked me to wait a minute. That was the first time I really noticed how quiet it was back there, my engine the only sound. I checked the rear view more out of habit than anything and saw two silhouettes step out from between parked cars at the far end of the lot. At first, my brain filed it under other people exist. But as they kept walking, I realized they weren't heading to the building or to a specific car. Their path was a slow curve that lined up more and more with my lane, which meant with us. Nothing about them was dramatic. They weren't running or waving or shouting. They were just getting closer at the exact speed. That gave me time to watch them and second-guess myself. The guy in my back seat said his friend was close, asked again if I could just wait, and I heard myself say something about the app not liking being behind buildings, and that I should keep a better signal near the front. I didn't say, "I think those two are here for us," but that was all I was thinking, and it came with that hot feeling in my chest where you know you're either about to look stupid or save yourself. Instead of sitting there and choosing, I put the car in drive and started moving. I didn't stomp the gas. I just rolled forward like I had decided to reposition a little. And in the mirror, I watched the two men slow their walk as I passed the line where we would have met if I'd stayed. One of them lifted his hand halfway, like he'd been about to flag us, and dropped it again. The passenger behind me went quiet while we came back around to the front of the strip, and the regular streetlights and empty storefront windows felt like a different world compared to that dead space in the back. I pulled into a spot under a camera near the front, ended the trip, and he said he'd get out there and walk. He stepped out, shut the door, and walked toward the main road, without even glancing toward the back where this friend at work supposedly was. That detail flipped my stomach harder than anything that had happened in the lot. All that pushing about the back entrance, and then, as soon as the car was in the open again, he suddenly didn't need it at all. I sat there for a minute with my hand still on the wheel, telling myself it was over, that I'd just been tired and weird about a late-night drop. And once I pulled out onto the main road again and put some distance between us, I actually started to feel that floaty relief of getting away from something uncomfortable. That lasted maybe 10 minutes. I was on a long, straight road with almost nobody else out. Just red lights ahead, and the glow of random closed shops, when a set of headlights came up behind me faster than they needed to. I figured it was just someone speeding until they didn't pass. They sat right behind me instead, closer than I liked for how empty the street was. I changed lanes to give them room, and they changed with me and kept the same distance. A little farther up, another car pulled out from a side street and ended up in front, and for a while it was just the three of us holding the same spacing, one ahead, one behind, me in the middle. It didn't look like much if you froze it as a picture, but sitting there in that little sandwich already keyed up from the strip, it felt way too similar to the way those two had curved toward my parked car. Same slow adjustment, same refusal to just go past and be random traffic. I turned off earlier than I needed to, into a brighter area with a grocery store and a bus stop and a cluster of lights. The car in front kept going straight. The one behind hesitated for a second like it was choosing. then followed the first through the intersection instead of turning with me. I pulled right up near the store entrance under a camera and stayed there with the engine running until my hands stopped shaking enough to drive the rest of the way home. There was never a police report, never any proof. No neat story you can point to after the fact. It's just this chain in my head of that quiet back lot. Two people slowly angling toward my car while the man inside gave me one more reason to sit still. And then later, thinking I was finally clear, and watching a different set of headlights fall into place around me on an almost empty road. I was house sitting for my older sister a few days ago, and it still feels wrong thinking about that house now. She and her husband were out of town for a long weekend, and I agreed to stay there with their dog and work from my laptop. It's a pretty normal, quiet neighborhood, the kind where a car going by at night actually stands out because it's so still most of the time. The first night was uneventful, just me and the dog and a lot of silence once it got late. On the second night, I realized I'd barely eaten anything and didn't feel like driving, so I put in a small grocery order to be dropped on the porch. I'd used the same app plenty of times at my own place, so I didn't think much of it. The estimate said about 45 minutes. I turned some lights off, left the porch light on for the driver, and walked a slow lap through the downstairs out of restlessness more than anything. When I passed the front room, I heard a car roll by, and then, a bit later, that faint low rumble again, like something circling the block. That second time, I stepped over to the window and stood slightly to the side of it, just enough to see out without being right in the frame. A car I didn't recognize had come to a stop a little down the street, not in front of any particular house, just sitting with its brake lights on. I watched long enough to feel stupid about it, and finally checked the app to see if maybe the driver had arrived early, and was confused. The map showed them still a ways off on a major road, nowhere near the neighborhood at all. When I glanced back out, the car down the street pulled away. Slow, like whoever was in it didn't want to look rushed. I told myself people get lost all the time in those twisty side streets, that it wasn't about me or the house, and went back toward the kitchen. The actual grocery driver showed up later, left the bags. We exchanged a couple of words and he left. When I looked past him out to the street, it was quiet again. No extra car, no one standing around. I locked the door, carried everything to the counter, and tried to let go of that weird feeling of being watched through glass. After I put everything away, I turned off most of the downstairs lights and started getting ready to head up to the guest room. The dog followed me out of the kitchen like usual, but when we reached the hallway, he stopped and didn't come any farther. I called him, expecting him to race me up the stairs the way he always did. But he stayed right there, legs stiff, attention fixed on the top of the staircase. He wasn't barking or doing anything dramatic, just staring. And there was something about that stillness that made my skin prickle, more than any noise would have. I was standing next to him when the house made a sound I couldn't shrug off. It was just one slow board creak from upstairs, in the direction of the guest room I was using. I hadn't been up there since before the delivery. I held my breath without meaning to, listening for it again, and after a few seconds there was another small shift, like weight rolling from one foot to the other on old wood. I tried to tell myself it could be anything. Temperature changes, the dog earlier, my imagination. But it lined up too neatly with where his eyes were fixed. I should have gone straight back to the door and out of the house, but it's strange how fast you start negotiating with yourself when you're scared inside what is supposed to be a safe place. I kept thinking I just needed my phone and keys from the nightstand upstairs, that once those were in my pocket, I could decide what to do from outside if I still felt weird. The idea of calling anyone without my stuff on me felt wrong, like I'd be making it harder on myself later. So instead of leaving, I told myself I would go up quietly, grab my things, and come right back down. I started up the stairs, trying to avoid the worst of the squeaky spots, one hand on the railing, ears straining for any new sound. The dog stayed at the bottom, still locked on the top landing. Halfway up, I paused and listened again. The house went silent in that heavy way where it feels like someone is holding their breath with you. The top of the staircase turned slightly, so from the last few steps you couldn't see the guest room door until you were almost there. When I reached the top and leaned just enough to see down the hall, someone stepped in from the left, out of the blind spot, and clapped a hand over my mouth so hard my teeth clicked shut. His other arm wrapped around me at the same time and slid straight to my chest and then down, grabbing me through my clothes in a way that made it very clear why he was there. My back hit the railing. His body pressed into mine, and it was like every thought in my head shut off at once except for one. This is exactly what you were trying to avoid. He kept his palm tight across my mouth and jaw, fingers digging in, his forearm pinning the top of my chest while his hand groped lower. I could feel the weight of him and the smell of someone who'd been sweating in the same clothes for a while. He didn't bother with any words. He didn't have to. The way he had waited right at the turn of the stairs, the way his hand went where it did first, said more than anything he could have said out loud. For a second or two, I couldn't move at all. My hands were free, but they felt disconnected, like they belonged to somebody else standing nearby. He shifted his grip to press me harder into the railing as he tried to slide the hand lower, and in that slight adjustment, something changed below us. The dog, who had been silent, suddenly launched himself up the first few steps with this deep sound that I had never heard from him before. It wasn't a regular bark. It was more like a warning tearing out of him. The man's head turned just a little toward the noise, and in that tiny moment his fingers loosened over my mouth. I didn't think about it. I bit down as hard as I could on the edge of his hand. At the same time, the dog hit his legs from the side, teeth snapping at his calf. The combination knocked his balance off. He let go of my face to shove at the dog and swore under his breath, and that was the only opening I was going to get. I dropped down and sideways, twisting out from between him and the railing, and stumbled down the stairs more than I ran them, one hand skidding along the wall to keep from falling outright. I could feel air moving behind me, hear the dog snarling and the scuffle of shoes on wood, but I didn't look back. I just aimed for the front door, grabbed the handle and yanked it open so hard it slammed into the wall. Cold air hit me as I ran out onto the porch and down to the sidewalk barefoot. It was only when I reached the middle of the front yard that I realized my phone was still upstairs on the nightstand and that I had no way to call anyone from the street. My stomach dropped at that, but then I heard claws on the path and saw the dog sprinting out after me. The doorway behind him stayed empty. Whoever that man was, he didn't follow us out. I ran to the neighbors a couple houses down and banged on their door until they answered. From there, we called the police and waited with all the lights on. When officers went back to my sister's house with us, they found the front door open from where I'd left it. The back door shut, all the windows closed, and no obvious sign of how he'd gotten in. Upstairs, the guest room I'd been using had the covers turned back, like someone had been sitting on the bed, and there were faint, drying marks on the stairs and hallway, like someone had come in from outside and never fully wiped their shoes. Nobody has any clear answers yet. I don't know if that first car I saw belonged to him, or if he'd been watching the house even before I agreed to stay there. I just know that he was close enough to wait at the top of the stairs, with his hand already out, close enough to touch me before I even saw his face, and that the only reason I'm not still in that hallway is because the dog chose that exact second to go up after us and break whatever control he thought he had. When I was about 11, my parents let me start walking home alone from my best friend's place, as long as I was back before it got fully dark, and I stuck to the same route every time. He lived in an apartment building about 15 minutes from my house, and behind his building, there was this narrow service path that ran all the way down the back of the block. On one side of it, there was a tall chain-link fence with those plastic privacy slats woven through it, and on the other side were the backs of garages and little storage sheds. In the daytime, my friends and I cut through there all the time because it shaved a good 10 minutes off going around to the main street with the traffic lights. So to us it was just the shortcut, and not something to think too hard about. One Friday in the winter, I went over to his place after school and ended up staying later than I meant to. We got caught up playing video games and eating junk, and by the time I finally called my mom to say I was heading home, the sun was already dropping behind the buildings. She said I needed to leave right then and not stop anywhere, and I told her I would. My friend's mom walked us down the hallway and watched us go out the back door of the building and then went back upstairs, and it was just the two of us standing there at the start of the path, with our breath showing a little in the air. The shortcut looked different at that time of day. The streetlights from the main road didn't really reach down into it, so most of it was this long tunnel of dim gray, with the only real light coming from a couple of motion sensors over garage doors here and there. We'd still been through it in the evening before, though, and we knew exactly how far it ran and where it came out by the corner near my house, so it didn't feel like some big brave thing to walk it. We both had our phones in our pockets and joked about racing to the end, and waited for one of the motion lights to switch on, so we could see more than just a few steps ahead. We didn't end up racing, we just walked side by side, kicking little rocks on the ground and talking about the game we'd been playing. The path was only wide enough for the two of us if we stayed close. If someone came the other way, we always had to turn sideways a bit to let them pass. Our sneakers made that crunching sound on the mix of gravel and old concrete, and for the first few minutes that was pretty much the only sound, except for distant cars from the main road. I remember thinking it felt colder back there than it had out in the open, like the walls were holding the chill in. At some point we both stopped talking at almost the exact same time, because we heard another set of footsteps that wasn't ours. It was the same kind of crunching sound but farther ahead, just around a bend in the path where it turned slightly behind the next building. Whoever it was sounded like they were walking slowly. Not rushing, just one step and then another on that loose gravel. We couldn't see them at all, just that sound, and we looked at each other and kind of did that nervous smile kids do when something feels off, but you don't want to say you're scared first. There were a couple of options that went through my head. Either it was just someone else cutting through the same way, which had happened before in the daytime, or it was someone who had been there already when we came out and we just hadn't noticed. I kept trying to make it normal in my head by picturing some old guy walking his dog or a neighbor taking out trash, even though I couldn't hear a leash or a bag or anything. Just the steps. We slowed down without really talking about it and listened. The footsteps kept going for a few seconds like the person was moving away from us, and that helped for a moment. Then they stopped. Not faded out or turned into some other noise. Just stopped, like whoever it was had come to a complete standstill. We froze too. It went really quiet all of a sudden. So quiet it made me aware of things I hadn't noticed before. I was looking at my friend and he was looking back at me, and I could tell he was waiting to see what I was going to do, because my house was the one at the end of the route, and he always peeled off before that. While we were both just standing there, and nothing was happening in front of us, I got this sharp feeling that whatever was wrong wasn't in front anymore. It's hard to explain how fast that hit me. 1 second I was staring into the darkness ahead, and the next second it felt like every part of me was yelling that something was behind us instead. Almost right with that feeling I heard it. Leaves and gravel crunching from just a few steps back the way we'd come. Closer than the footsteps ahead had sounded, like someone had closed that distance while we were focused on the bend. I didn't say anything. I didn't even look back. It was like my body decided for me. As soon as I heard that sound behind me, I just took off running in the direction of my house, straight down the path, shoulders brushing the fence on one side and almost hitting the garages on the other whenever it narrowed. I could hear footsteps on the ground behind me, matching my run, and in that moment I was really hoping it was just my friend panicking and doing the same thing. But I was too scared to check. All I thought about was the strip of sidewalk at the end of the path and then the corner where I could turn toward home. The path always felt short when we played in it, but while I was running, it felt twice as long. The motion lights flicked on and off above different doors as I went under them, and every time I passed one I felt exposed, like if someone was close, they'd see me clearly then. After maybe half a minute of just sprinting and hearing those steps behind me, the sound changed. Instead of being right behind me, it suddenly veered off to my right, like whoever it was had cut through one of the gaps between the garages or turned into a side yard. I could hear gravel scatter and then nothing in that direction. I didn't slow down. I ran the rest of the way to the end of the path, burst out onto the sidewalk by the corner near my street, and only then looked back. There was no one there, just the empty strip of fence and the path disappearing between the buildings. My chest was burning and my legs felt shaky. I cut across the little piece of grass and into my yard, and went straight in through the front door without even taking my shoes off. My parents were in the living room and both of them looked up right away when they saw my face. I must have looked bad because my dad stood up before I even said anything. I told them what happened, probably in one long run-on sentence, while I was spilling everything out to my parents. Another thought started to push through the panic that made me feel sick, and it was that the door had never opened again behind me. I kept flicking my eyes toward the front window, waiting to see my friend come around the corner or up the walk, but the street stayed empty. Right as my mom was asking if he might have gone back to his building instead, the doorbell rang. My dad told me to stay put and went to open the door just a crack. As soon as he did, my friend shoved it the rest of the way open and came inside fast, looking like he'd just finished crying or was about to start. He said when I ran he couldn't move at first, like his feet were stuck, and that he stood there frozen in the path listening. He heard the steps behind him too, not long after I took off, and he swore there were two different rhythms for a while, like two people running after me, not one. He said he stayed pressed up against the fence trying not to make noise, while those footsteps went past him, both of them going in the direction I'd run, and that after a bit they faded, and he couldn't hear anything but his own breathing. He waited there, trying to decide if he should go back to his building or follow the path toward my house, and finally chose to run my way, because it felt safer to end up at a house with adults in it than back in his lobby alone. By the time he started running, the path was empty. My parents called the non-emergency line and reported what we'd both described. An officer came by, asked us questions, and even walked the shortcut with my dad, while it was still that early dark, shining a flashlight along the fence and between the garages, but they didn't find anything or anyone. There weren't any other reports from that night. My friend and I still bring it up sometimes when we talk about being kids, and we both have our own ideas about what was going on, but none of them feel good. It's been over years and I've moved away now. But even walking past narrow alleys or between buildings at night still makes me feel that same rush I felt in that path. Like if I listen hard enough, I'll hear someone matching my steps just out of sight.